Imagine working for 6 years to build something safe, something yours. Then your own brother walks into a courtroom and tells a judge you stole it from him. Your mother backs him up. Your family calls you greedy. And for one terrible second, you wonder if the system might actually believe them. That's exactly where I was sitting when the clerk passed a 12-page report to the judge. And the moment she opened it, everything my brother had spent months building collapsed on the record. My name is Hannah Reese. I'm 34 years old. I work as a county records technician, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days surrounded by filing cabinets, property documents, and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. It's not glamorous. Nobody at a dinner party has ever said, "Tell me more about deed transfers." But I understand how documents work. I understand chains of ownership and recorded liens, and what a clean title looks like versus a messy one. I just never talked about it at home because nobody ever asked. In my family, I was the responsible one, the one who showed up early, stayed late, and fixed whatever was broken. My older brother, Derek, was the one they praised, even when he blew up his own life, even when he burned through jobs and relationships like matches. They treated him like someone the world owed a second chance, and a third, and a fourth. All I ever wanted was simple, a stable home, a little peace after a childhood that felt like living inside a thunderstorm that never fully passed. So I saved. I worked overtime, I picked up side jobs on weekends, and I bought a small house with a tiny yard and a front porch just wide enough for one chair. I made it my safe place. I painted the walls myself. I planted flowers along the walkway. I hung a wind chime by the kitchen window that made a sound like someone gently tapping glass. I never asked my family for $1, not one, and somehow, that made me the selfish one. I'm tired of being painted as greedy for wanting to keep something I built with my own hands. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. If you've ever been the steady one in a messy family, working hard while someone else gets praised for just existing, hit subscribe. Have you ever had someone try to take credit for what you built? Drop a quick comment and tell me about it. And click hype or like so more people who need this story can find it. Because what happened next is something I never thought my own family would do. Derek showed up on a Saturday morning in March. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. He stood on my porch with a duffel bag over his shoulder, and that same easy grin he'd been using to talk his way through life since we were kids. "Hey, sis, mind if I crash for a few weeks? I'm starting over." I should have said no right then. But he was my brother, and he looked tired, and the part of me that had spent my whole life fixing things for this family opened the door. 2 weeks turned into a month. He ate my food. He used my electricity. He left his shoes in the hallway and his dishes in the sink. And then, one evening, sitting on my couch like he owned it, he said something that made my stomach drop. "You should put me on the deed. It's family." I set my glass of water down carefully. "What? Come on, Hannah. You don't deserve a whole house to yourself. I need stability too." I told him no. He called our mother. Within an hour, she was on the phone telling me I was being unfair. "Be fair," she said, her voice tight with that particular brand of disappointment she reserved just for me. "Your brother needs it more than you do. Need doesn't equal ownership." "Mom," Derek took the phone back. "After everything I've been through, you're really gonna say no? After all the times I had your back, I couldn't think of a single time he'd had my back. Not one." I said no again. He moved out 3 days later without a word. I thought it was over. It wasn't. The following Tuesday, a man in a polo shirt knocked on my door and handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a legal petition. My brother was claiming an ownership interest in my home. The paperwork said the house was meant to be family property. It said Derek had contributed cash toward the purchase. It said I had promised him half. Every single word was a lie. But it was a lie typed on legal paper and filed with a court. And that made it dangerous. 2 weeks later, At a family cookout I almost didn't attend, my mother stood up in front of a yard full of relatives holding paper plates and said, loud enough for everyone, "We're praying Hannah stops being greedy and does the right thing." I felt every head turn toward me. Someone near the grill muttered, just loud enough, "So she stole his house." I put my plate down. I walked to my car. And I sat there in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, understanding for the first time that this wasn't a guilt trip anymore. This was a plan, a real, calculated plan to take my home through the court system. The story Derek told spread fast. Within a week, I started hearing versions of it from people I hadn't spoken to in months, aunts, cousins, old family friends. The story was always the same. Derek had helped with the down payment. Derek had sacrificed. Hannah was keeping him out of what was rightfully his. I called him one night, my voice shaking. Not from fear, but from the effort of staying calm. Tell them the truth, Derek. He laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, the kind that tells you someone isn't even trying to pretend anymore. Truth is, you wouldn't have made it without me. You never gave me a cent. That's your version. He hung up. A week later, I received a letter from his attorney. It was aggressive, formal, and designed to intimidate. It demanded I turn over bank statements going back 5 years. It accused me of hiding assets. It used phrases like failure to disclose and equitable interest and unjust enrichment. I read it 3 times at my kitchen table while the wind chime outside tapped gently against the window frame. Oblivious to everything falling apart inside, Mom called the evening. "If you've got nothing to hide, why are you scared?" "I'm not scared, Mom. I'm angry. See, that's your problem. Always angry." Then the strange things started. Little things that I might have missed if I weren't the kind of person who notices when a folder is half an inch to the left of where I put it. Mail went missing from my box. A tax document I'd left in my desk drawer was sitting on top of the desk when I came home. A property folder I kept in my filing cabinet had been opened and not closed properly. I drove to my mother's house on a Sunday afternoon. Derek was there, sitting on the couch watching television like he didn't have a care in the world. "Did you go through my papers?" I asked. He didn't even look away from the screen. "You're paranoid, Hannah. That's why nobody trusts you." Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. "Maybe if you just cooperated, none of this would be happening." I left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak around me. And I thought about what it would feel like to lose it. To pack my life into cardboard boxes and watch someone who had never paid a single bill walk through my front door like it was his. The thought made my chest tight and my eyes sting. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, something shifted. I stopped trying to make them believe me. I stopped begging for fairness from people who had already decided the verdict. I got up, made coffee, and sat down at my computer. I requested official copies of every document connected to my property. I pulled my complete payment history from the mortgage company. I downloaded 6 years of bank statements. I printed tax returns showing every deduction, every payment, every dollar I had poured into that house. I worked quietly, methodically, the way I worked every single day at my job, where accuracy wasn't optional and details weren't suggestions. 2 days later, Derek sent me a text. "When I win, you can rent a room from me." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I set my phone down and went back to my documents. Not if the paperwork speaks first. Maybe if you just cooperated, none of this would be happening. I left without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak around me. And I thought about what it would feel like to lose it, to pack my life into cardboard boxes and watch someone who had never paid a single bill walk through my front door like it was his. The thought made my chest tight and my eyes sting. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, something shifted. I stopped trying to make them believe me. I stopped begging for fairness from people who had already decided the verdict. I got up, made coffee, and sat down at my computer. I requested official copies of every document connected to my property. I pulled my complete payment history from the mortgage company. I downloaded 6 years of bank statements. I printed tax returns, showing every deduction, every payment, every dollar I had poured into that house. I worked quietly, methodically, the way I worked every single day at my job, where accuracy wasn't optional and details weren't suggestions. 2 days later, Derek sent me a text. When I win, you can rent a room from me. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I set my phone down and went back to my documents. Not if the paperwork speaks first. Her name was Ms. Delgado. She was my supervisor at the county office. A woman in her late 50s with silver streaked hair and a voice that never rose above a conversational tone. No matter how chaotic things got around her, she had trained me when I first started, and over the years she became the closest thing I had to a mentor. I'd never brought personal problems to work. That was a rule I kept like a wall between 2 rooms I didn't want touching. But one afternoon, after a sleepless night and a morning spent staring at legal letters that made my stomach churn, I sat down across from her desk and said, "They're trying to take my house, and they're calling me a liar." Ms. Delgado listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands and said, "What do the records show? Everything, every payment, every filing. All in my name. Then you already have what you need. You just have to organize it so a judge can follow the story in under 10 minutes. She walked me through the process. Not anything improper, nothing that crossed a line. She showed me what was public record and how to request it properly. She taught me how to organize exhibits so they told a clear, chronological story. She reminded me how to stay factual under pressure, how to answer what's asked, how to let the documents carry the weight so my voice didn't have to. Family cases get emotional, she said, leaning back in her chair. They'll try to make you react. They'll say something personal, something designed to knock you off balance. Don't give them that. Stay in the records. Meanwhile, my family's confidence swelled like a balloon. Nobody thought to check for holes. Derek bragged to relatives. She'll fold. He told our cousin at a barbecue. She always does. Mom called me one last time. Settle and stop embarrassing us. Just give him something and move on with your life. Derek even offered a deal. He said if I signed him onto the deed temporarily, he'd drop the case temporarily, like putting a fox in the henhouse and calling it a visit. I said no. They acted stunned. So you want to fight your own blood? Mom asked, her voice thick with manufactured sadness. I want to keep my home. I said, that's all I've ever wanted. The morning of the hearing, I put on a gray blazer and flat shoes. I picked up the binder I'd spent 3 weeks building, every page tabbed, every document dated, every exhibit labeled. I drove to the courthouse with the windows down because the air felt good on my face, and I needed to feel something that wasn't dread. When I walked into the courtroom, Derek was already there, leaning back in his chair with one arm draped over the back like he was waiting for a movie to start. He was smiling. He looked at my binder like it was a prop. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It smelled like wood polish and recycled air, and the overhead lights buzzed with a faint, electrical hum that vibrated just behind my ears. It was a local civil court, not a grand chamber with marble columns, just a room with hard benches, a raised desk for the judge, and tables facing forward. I sat at one table with my binder. Derek sat at the other with his attorney, a man in a shiny suit who kept checking his phone before the proceedings started. Mom sat in the row behind Derek, her purse on her lap, her chin lifted. The judge was a woman named Judge Alderman, mid-50s, with short hair and a no-nonsense expression that told me she had heard every kind of lie a courtroom could produce and had long since stopped being impressed by any of them. Derek's attorney. When first, he called Derek to the stand. Derek sat down, adjusted his color, and told his story like he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. I gave my sister cash for the down payment, he said. His voice smooth and steady. We had a verbal agreement. The house was supposed to be shared. Everyone in the family knew. His attorney nodded along. And did your sister honor that agreement? No, she cut me out. She changed the locks and refused to even talk about it. Mom was called next. She put her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, and then immediately began editing it. Derek sacrificed for Hannah, she said. He gave her money when she had nothing. She's ungrateful. She always has been. I listened. I didn't react. I kept my hands flat on the table the way Ms. Delgado had taught me, and I breathed through my nose. When it was my turn, I stood and spoke clearly, Your Honor. I'm not here to argue feelings. I'm here with records. My attorney submitted the binder, 12 pages of documentation, professionally organized, payment history for every mortgage installment over 6 years, the recorded deed showing one name, mine, bank statements proving every dollar of the down payment came from my accounts and my side work, tax return showing I had claimed and paid property taxes alone every single year, and a timeline, a detailed month-by-month timeline that contradicted everything Derek had just said under oath. The judge reviewed the documents carefully, turning pages slowly while the courtroom sat in silence. Then she stopped on one page. Mr. Reese, she said, looking at Derek over her reading glasses, you testified that you contributed funds toward the down payment on this property. Yes, Your Honor. These records indicate that on the date of purchase, you were residing in another state. Your bank records from that period, which were subpoenaed as part of discovery, show a wage garnishment and a negative account balance. Can you explain how you contributed funds you did not appear to have? Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a full 2 seconds. Then he started talking fast, tripping over his own words, trying to reroute a story that had just hit a wall. It was cash, Your Honor. I gave it in cash. There wouldn't be a record. Convenient, the judge said. She turned another page. I'm also looking at an affidavit that was submitted to the county recorder's office from months ago, attempting to add your name to the property deed. It was flagged and rejected due to a notary discrepancy. Were you aware of this filing? Derek looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at the table. I don't know anything about that, Derek said, but his voice had changed. The smoothness was gone. It sounded thin now, like paper stretched too tight. I spoke one more time, Your Honor. Here is the certified copy of the deed history and the complete tax payment record every year. In my name, no other name appears anywhere in the ownership chain. Judge Alderman closed the binder. She looked at Derek for a long moment, then at his attorney, then back at Derek. Mr. Reese, your petition is denied. I find no credible evidence of contribution, ownership interest, or any enforceable agreement. Furthermore, the attempted filing with the recorder's office raises serious concerns that I am referring for further review. You are also ordered to pay a portion of the respondent's legal costs. She paused. I would advise you to be very careful about what you claim under oath in the future. The gavel came down. It wasn't loud, but it echoed outside the courtroom. The hallway was bright and empty. Derek caught up to me near the elevator. His face was tight. His jaw clenched. You think you're better than me now, he said. I looked at him. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. No, I said. I just finally stopped being your backup plan. I drove home with the windows down again. The air smelled like fresh cut grass from the park 2 blocks over, and the late afternoon sun came through the windshield in long golden stripes that warmed my hands on the steering wheel. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment and looked at my house. Same porch, same wind chime, same front door I painted blue 3 summers ago. But it felt different. Not because anything had changed about the house, because something had changed about me. I wasn't shrinking inside those walls anymore. The next morning, I changed the locks. I set up a P.O. box for sensitive mail. I put a credit freeze on my accounts and moved my important documents into a fireproof safe I bought at the hardware store for $40. Small steps that felt enormous. I called my mother one last time, not to argue, not to explain, just to say what I needed to say. You don't get to call me greedy for protecting what I built, Mom. Not anymore. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You've changed, Hannah." "I hope so," I said, and I hung up. Derek's credibility crumbled in the weeks that followed. Relatives who had taken his side started hearing the real story. Not from me, but from the court record, which is public. The cousins who had whispered at that cookout stopped whispering. Some of them reached out. I didn't respond to all of them. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I won because I stayed steady, because I prepared, because I refused to let volume replace evidence or emotion replace facts. They tried to take my home in court and ended up proving I was the only one telling the truth. If someone in your family has ever tried to take what you worked for, your house, your savings, your peace, I know how violating that feels. It's not just about money. It's about someone looking at the life you built with your own hands and deciding they're entitled to it simply because you share blood. Subscribe if you're building a life that doesn't depend on anyone's approval, and share your story. In the comments, did anyone ever try to claim something that was yours? How did you handle it? Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Thank you for watching, truly. If my story touched something in you, a like would mean a lot. To help others find this story, click hype. I read the comments, every single one. So share a piece of your story below. What would you do if someone tried to take your home? You're not alone in this, and your story matters just as much as mine.